The purpose of this presentation, though, is just to sort of talk about fundamentally what's different about Drupal 8 with respect to translation and multilingual content than Drupal 7. If you guys, Bill and I were just talking about it, but have you worked on multilingual websites in Drupal 7 before? Any of you guys? I know Bill has a little bit. No? Okay, so the good news for you is that if you do that for the first time in Drupal 8, it'll be just a gazillion times easier to manage. We'll get into this, but one of the key aspects of Drupal 8 was making Drupal a truly multilingual platform where the source language for any website can be any language rather than just English. So here's what we'll walk through. We'll talk a little bit about the general challenges associated with managing a multilingual website. If you think about it, if it's a website in 10 different languages, it's almost like it's 10 different websites, one in each language. And so that it's complicated to manage, and there's always this challenge associated with keeping all of the languages in sync. Websites these days have so much content, it's constantly being added in the source language. And they're so dynamic. There are all these SaaS products, and there's all this dynamic content being delivered. There's a need to translate all that stuff. It has to be an agile process, otherwise it just can't keep up with the speed with which things change. So what we're really going to do is describe the gap between Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. What changed, why it's so much better. We'll take a quick look at a basic look at the Drupal 8 module. And then I'll tell you a little bit about Lingotek and how we work with that. So here's the challenge, right? International organizations, companies, excuse me, they need to localize, translate stuff continuously. It constantly changes. So the old model of basically packaging up content from a website, sending it off to some brick and mortar agency, having it translated, getting it back and deploying it 3 weeks later or a month later just doesn't work anymore because the content's continuously changing. The old way of doing things just doesn't have the agility to keep up. And so translation became sort of a bottleneck as the velocity with which translation needed to occur, new content was being added, the translation process just couldn't keep up. And so that's what Lingotek, that's basically our premise as a company, is to make that process agile, to have a way to continuously publish multilingual content rather than have it be kind of a project or a transactional model that you initiate whenever you need stuff translated. Guess what? You need stuff translated every day. There are always press releases, new content, new product documentation, marketing initiatives, all of those sorts of things. So what we do is we make that process agile. We've been involved with Drupal since about 2010, going back to Drupal 6. We've got hundreds of customers running Drupal 7. Our module is by far the most widely utilized translation module on Drupal. I think this is a little dated. I think we're closer to 65,000 downloads now. 600 or 700 sites reporting. So, love the Drupal. Lingotek's a SaaS-based translation platform, and we have connectors into different CMSs and content containers, Marketo, things like that. But Drupal is probably the most substantial part of our business. So this is, Bill and I were talking about this, but in D7, translation was a real challenge. The only source language was English. There were a lot of things in core that were not readily translatable. This is something Bill and I were just talking about. The green things there are multilingual things that you needed to have installed to do a multilingual website that are in core, and all of the rest of those were contrib. So you really had to create this kind of Frankenstein, Drupal installation in order to manage translation, and it was very, very challenging to do. At least 20 different modules required to do a multilingual website.
The good news is that can be made to work.
Yes.
But you pay a price.
Yeah, I mean, Lingotek bolts on top of all of that. If you install our module, one of the first things you see is here's a list of dependencies that you also have to install. So we bolt on top of the I18N suite. But it was, it was complicated because sometimes there'd be conflicts between some of these contrib modules you had to have for translation and some of the modules that you're using to build the website. A problem that we saw that was just rampant is that the site would be designed, the collection of modules that were fundamental to the site design would be established before managing multilingual content was contemplated. And then they'd decide that they wanted to do that, and they'd install Lingotek or something else, and they'd find that there were these fundamental blockers, compatibility blockers with other modules that they used. And so it was a real pain in the neck. And here are some of the kind of the stars of that show. There are these grand contemplations you had to make. Should I use I18N or should I use Entity? Which one of those should I use? Menus were hard to translate. There are different options for that. Ultimately, you had to make a decision about which one, and so we standardized around the translate and localize method. But if that wasn't compatible with what a customer was doing, we had to get them to change to that technique as well. Another one was field collections, very, very popular, fun to set up, but very fragile to translate. I mean, 3 or 4 months ago, there were over 100,000 sites using field collections, and I think it's probably 120, 125 or something like that. So, we figured out ways to work with these. The easiest way to do a website would be to use drush commands to sort of get everything configured to translate. And we tried to make it as easy as we could, and it is pretty easy. I mean, one of the reasons attendance is down this year compared to last year at this conference is because most folks are running Drupal 7, but the adoption curve to Drupal 8 is going slower than anticipated, and yet most of what the conference program is about is Drupal 8. And so Drupal 7 is, we've got a great solution for that, and I don't want to sort of talk down on that. It works very well. It's easy to do. Most of the heavy lifting and hard work has already been done. So if you've got a Drupal 7 site that you want to translate, I think we have the best solution for that. But it's a little bit of sort of evangelizing about Drupal 8 is kind of what this presentation is.
That Lingotek, is it a single module that organizes and integrates with the other existing international?
Yes, it's a single module. It's called Lingotek Translation. Something I totally recommend if you've got a website that you're contemplating translating is install the module, install the dependent modules. Part of that is establishing an account in the cloud-based platform. And that one of the things that the platform offers to the Drupal community is free machine translation. Machine translation is not high enough quality to publish generally, but if you're in developer mode and you just want to see, well, what would this site look like in Finnish or in French or Spanish or with a right justified language like Arabic or Hebrew, you can quickly just send the entire site up and it'll translate in a matter of seconds and come back down. It'll be horrible quality, but you'll be able to see which elements of the site are properly exposed for translation. You can identify things that weren't wrapped in the teeth function or whatever. So it's a great little developer tool to just slap in the module, round trip the whole website, and just find things that aren't ready for translation. But we're in a lot of the most commonly used distributions. So it's very, very easy to do. In many cases, if you start with a distribution, you'll find that Lingotek is already installed. So Drupal 8, there was this massive multilingual dev effort. You guys probably read about it on the blogs, saw Dries talking about it for 2 years. It was a huge effort. There were thousands of contributors. I was telling Bill, this guy, Christian Lopez, who works for us, he's in Barcelona. His handle is Pennyasco, and he's one of the more prominent people. The most prominent person was Gabor Hochi. He led the multilingual effort, and the Drupal 8 effort in particular. but thousands and thousands of developer hours, close to 1,000 different issues resolved. And the result was this, was a Drupal 8 thing that was a nice, tight set of modules in which language was, sort of a fundamental aspect of, of establishing any instance for a website. It really, really made it so much simpler. So the very first thing that you do, and we'll talk about each of these 4 components, but the very first thing you do is you pick a source language. It used to be that was always English. So if you're trying to build a website for an audience in South America and it was principally going to be in, in Portuguese and Spanish, you had to start with the source in English and then just worry about deploying it in those other languages. Now, no more. If you're a Portuguese developer and you want to build a site and it only has to be in Portuguese, everything, all the nuts and bolts in the background can be in Portuguese as well. So that's the very first thing you do. It's the most fundamental thing that you do in Drupal 8 when you establish an instance to build a website, which is a total game changer from the way things were. Interface strings, everything's hard-coded for each module, titles, descriptions, text on the buttons, all of that stuff. In D8, translations in the language that you've chosen are automatically downloaded from localize.drupal.org. This happens during the setup process of the site. So that's another thing. It's just fundamentally different. Site content is marked as a specific language when it's created, which is a totally different thing than creating it in English and then having to translate it. Then the content translation module provides the UI to get content into all the different languages. So, this is an example where English is the source language and you're adding German and Spanish. Config translation is standardized. Most of the i18 suite has been put into core as configuration translation. It's just easier. The lines are more clearly drawn, less guesswork, much simpler. So, look at the difference between the kind of kaleidoscope of core and contrib versus just kind of the fundamental multilingual aspect of Drupal 8. So just to quickly take a look at kind of what it would look like inside Drupal to manage multilingual content in Drupal 8. Everything can be translated. This is an English node, but it might as well be in some other language. This is what you see when you click on the translate button. You basically see your source language, and you see these, this dashboard here will show anything that's out of sync. If there's something that's 20% out of sync, that means new content was added, wasn't changed yet. And you can also get some analytics quickly of, in each language what the total global audience is in that language. So if you want to send something for translation, you just simply check the box associated with that piece of content and click upload, and off it'll go to the TMS. And when it's finished, you'll see this little green, see that little green light that came on? That means that the translation has been completed. You can configure things so that you manually download when you see that, or it can automatically download and come back into the Drupal instance. So there it would be in the target language. Very, very simple process compared to what needed to happen before with all of those different modules bolted together. This is what's happening in the background, right? You're working in Drupal. You're connected to the translation management system, which is a SaaS-based thing. When you send something for translation, it gets pushed up to the cloud into your SaaS instance of the TMS. Up there, it can be translated however through any number of workflows that you decide you want to use. It can be professionally translated. The system will fire off emails to internal people at the company, and they'll click a link. It'll spin up a SaaS instance. There's a workbench there they can translate the stuff in. You can machine translate. You can apply translation memories, which basically means the system records everything that gets translated. And anytime subsequently content comes up for translation, the first thing that happens is it gets compared to previous translations, and anything that's been previously translated can be leveraged. And that ensures consistency of the translation. And then when the translation's done, gets pushed right back down to the Drupal instance. All of the HTML, all of the markup gets reinserted around, bundled around the content, and it can be reinserted into the website very, very quickly and easily. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
We're about halfway through, but I think you can still get some value. Actually, we're kind of in the home stretch. I did just want to talk a little bit about Lingotek and our approach. Most of our customers, they're not just running Drupal for their public-facing websites. They're also running internal things, intranets, and other things. So the Drupal within a large enterprise is larger than just that. What we do is, as I mentioned, we have a SaaS-based translation management system. We have integrations into a number of different content containers. Drupal is one of our primary ones, but there are about 30. Many of our customers are using 4 or 5 different connectors, and they're sharing translated content across different content containers like Marketo, document repositories, and things like that. We also do professional translation, so to the extent that professional translators are needed, some of our customers work with other agencies, and they're trained up on our platform, and then in some cases they work with us. Drupal is just a part of the mix, as I mentioned. If you think about a large enterprise, they use all kinds of different digital products. They might use Drupal for their public-facing website, but look at all of these other applications they may be using. They're probably using SharePoint. They probably use Git for development, for agile development. There are a bunch of different things. And if you can connect all of those things together with a cloud-based translation management system and leverage the same translations out across all of the different places, it's just a much, much easier thing to manage than having everybody managing their own translation in silos. So that's basically what that's about. Sharing it horizontally and vertically across departments and across applications is really the way to go. It's also, was there a question? Sorry. Oh, sorry. There's also, it's important to understand that not all content is created equal. Not all content needs to be created or translated in the same way. The most expensive way to translate is with professional translators, and that is the highest quality. So, if you think about a public-facing Drupal website, all of the marketing, all of the most visited pages, product descriptions, those need to be really precise translations. So companies will pay to do that. But on the other hand, they might have blog content, things like that don't need to be quite as good, and they might leverage internal people for that. So the community basically means people within the organization itself. They can be brought into the process. They can translate or they can review translations. You need flexible processes because different content gets different priorities. And then you might machine translate stuff. The quality is poor, but in certain instances that doesn't really matter. If, let's say, for example, it's some sort of a customer forum where customers go in and they ask a question, why can't I figure out how to do this with this software product? And they're just looking for an answer. If you translate that automatically, you can translate it in a matter of seconds, and other users of the customer forum in other languages will see the question in their language almost in real time, and they can respond in their language, and the answer will come back around to the person who asked it in their language. And so there's an immediacy to that's more important than the quality of the translation. If they can get the gist of what's been said, they can get an answer to their question, and that's really why they're sitting there on the customer forum trying to figure out how to do something they can't do. Another good example for comments is article or for automatic translation is article comments. I like to read a lot of media, like I read the New York Times op-eds, for example, and I like reading the comments underneath them. Because they're always very evocative kinds of articles. And lots of times when you read the comments, you can tell that it's clunky machine translation. You can just tell. And then you look, and it turns out, well, the guy who made the comment is, is from Shanghai. He made the comment in Chinese, and it's translated back to English. There are some grammar mistakes, but it's really interesting to get that guy's perspective despite that. So there are limited instances in which machine translation is absolutely great to use, and those have to do with the immediacy of it and when the quality is not at a premium. So it's important to have the flexibility to assign different types of content to different workflows. Another thing just to point out, devzone.lingotek.com, that's where you can find out anything about our APIs that you need to find out if you're trying to connect the system with something besides Drupal, with some custom system. We have a completely open API. It's very easy to do that. All of the notes, all the documentation is there. You just basically sign up, get a key, and go off to the races. Our system gets millions of calls per day from custom systems that people have written APIs to. This is a little dated, but these are some of our customers that are running on Drupal. As I mentioned, we've got well over 100 on Drupal 7. I think we have about a dozen running Drupal 8 at this point, but it's growing fairly rapidly. We're excited about it, and we're excited to be kind of ahead of the curve in terms of having a good Drupal 8 solution available. We work with a lot of digital agencies. Our pals from MediaCurrent are on the slide there. Do a lot of stuff with them, have a lot of customers with them, which is very, very nice, because translation is kind of a niche thing, and the agencies are working on giant website products, and they involve all kinds of bundles of technologies, and if there's a multilingual aspect involved, they turn to us. So that's basically it. We have, there's plenty of time. We don't have to use the full hour, but questions, comments, concerns? We could have a little round table if we want.
One of the questions we had when we were doing this with Drupal 7 was on taxonomy.
Mm-hmm.
We never were quite sure whether taxonomy is content or configuration, and in the Drupal 7 world, that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Has Lingotek decided on one of those two? Does it matter in Drupal 8?
I think it doesn't matter in Drupal 8. In in D7. Anybody else know the answer to that? I can't remember. The short answer is yes. We did decide on one of the two. That was one of the challenges that I talked about with D7 is that you had to make a decision on that. I can't remember which it was, but you had to standardize around one of those. You couldn't do both, and you couldn't do one of them. I can't remember which it was, but
content translation and entity translation. Yes, you can do both.
Yes, you can do both. Although our recommendation is entity translation.
Definitely, but it doesn't work for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Depends upon what you want to do. We were trying entity translation on the corporate website, and we are all those small countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a D7 site? Yeah. Yeah, those.
So, and people say you can use content translation on one content type and then use entity translation on another content, or probably on something else. Depends upon how you use stuff.
Yeah.
So you can have both, but you have to be very, very conscious about what you're doing in every second.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I didn't try to do it in Windows 8 yet.
Have you guys worked with the 8 yet on anything?
Yeah.
Just a little bit?
Translation.
Right.
But about the taxonomy question, in D8, is it true that it doesn't matter anymore, like from a Lingotek module perspective?
Yes.
So, in both D8 and D7, does the Lingotek module act as a black box, the only thing that you would have to interact with for translation, and it hides the complexity of your cloud solution on the 8 side. It hides the complexity of that cluster of other modules on the D7 side?
It strives to. It's a heavy lift with D7, because of all the other module dependencies. With D8, it's completely seamless. And the whole point, of course, is that, there's this cloud-based platform, browser-driven thing that's our TMS. The point of the integration is to bring the relevant functionality directly down into the individual CMS or application. So from that standpoint, the cloud-based platform becomes kind of a black box because you're right there working in Drupal. If you want to translate something, you can select it, you can send it, you can see the status. When it's ready, you can download it, it comes back in. You don't have to interact with the cloud platform really at all.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that was an approach that we started taking, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago with the translation management system, because it also functions as a standalone SaaS product, right? It's a project management suite, it's a translation database. We do have customers that just use that as a SaaS platform, and they upload documents to it and get them translated, and then they download documents. But by integrating with CMSs like Drupal, we just kind of found that that's where content lives. And so we had this great thing, and it was like, how can we connect it up to things where content lives? And a big aspect of that is to deeply integrate with those places so that people that are using those products like Marketo or Drupal or Adobe Experience Manager, whatever it is, the relevant functionality for translation is baked right into their admin instance of that platform. So all of the relevant functionality is intended to be right there in the platform. And so it is, in that way, it's kind of a black box. But there's a lot of visibility into the black box about the status of things and so forth.
Yeah. On the TMS side, you had 3 different means of translation: automatic, community, and professional. Is there like an average turnaround time for professional? So, for example, if you provide, I don't know, a document that contains 1,000 words, is there like an average turnaround time for that?
Well, it's one of the things that's nice about our setup is that it's so scalable. We have a worldwide network of somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 certified linguists that are certified on our platform, and they meet whatever qualifications, international standards for translation. And so, if depending upon the amount of time or the amount of content and any deadlines, we can scale up as many translators as we need. They typically translate between 1,000 and 2,000 words per day each. And then there's a review process that is faster. So depending upon the workflow that you set up, do you want professional translation and then professional review, and then review of the content by a localization engineer in context to make sure it looks proper on the website? That's the highest quality. That's but that takes the longest. Another option is to do what we call post-edited machine translation, where it gets fired through a machine translation engine like Google or Bing, and then the next step is a professional linguist looks at the resulting, kind of mess and fixes it, because machine translation is pretty poor quality.
It's easier to translate from the beginning.
Yeah.
As a translator, I'm dealing sometimes with this
Yes.
post-edited
Yeah,
translation.
sometimes it's even harder.
And
It's true.
It's it's absence of respect for human intelligence.
It's interesting. Have you seen these articles lately? And I'm really curious about this. In the last month or so, I've seen a bunch of articles about how Google Translate is going to totally next level based on them integrating artificial intelligence sort of data streams of some sort. And supposedly it's going to get way better. But you're right. To this point, with certain types of simple content, it's faster and the quality is good enough so that it's worth doing. It's less expensive if you just need a professional reviewer rather than 2 professional linguists, one to translate, one to review. But with a lot of types of content, the gobbledygook that comes back, it's even harder to fix that than it would be to translate from scratch, because
It depends upon what languages you're working.
that's true too. That's true too. But sometimes,
Different groups of languages have different grammatical structures.
Yep.
And whatever you do, I mean, they are.
absolutely. I mean, sometimes I have guys that work for me write up, that are technical guys, write up notes from a meeting or something like that, and then they send them to me so that I can just kind of proof them before they go to the customer. And it's the the writing is so bad that I just wish that I would have written it myself, because I'm trying to fix grammar errors. But even after doing that, the whole paragraph is so poorly organized that
And then,
you know.
To say, okay, I can't even say sometimes that this is wrong.
Mhm.
No, well, you can say that the contents is okay,
Right.
but the human side of me, the human part of me says, you don't say so.
Right, right.
So even if you can understand the contents, the meaning of the text,
Mm-hmm.
then I mean, and when I see bad translations, then it's just the total lack of respect
Yep.
for me as a reader, and I want to deal with this kind of.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's worse to have bad translation than none at all,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
it can really make your brand look bad. It can make it look like you don't know what you're doing, or you don't care about the audience for that
Exactly.
particular content. So you're just machine translating, whatever, and it's terrible. And it can really make you look bad. It can be like sending somebody out to present at a conference that has no idea what they're talking about. You know, it's that kind of a thing.
We are talking about this artificial intelligence, and at the same time we have a breed of people who are like intercultural consultants.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, help.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. A lot of our customers are kind of.
You shouldn't have this. You shouldn't need these kind of people, because if you were like conscious about that the language is quite a bit of intercultural
Mm-hmm. Nuance.
communication.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we're trying to optimize in production industry and stuff like that. But we are not trying to yeah, we are trying to prove stupid optimizing in this kind of industry as well, but
Mhm.
it doesn't work.
Correct. I agree.
And then I mean, me as a Swedish speaker, we see like Windows.
Mhm.
It's well, I mean, I don't even understand as a day-to-day Windows administrator. I don't. Sometimes I don't really understand what the message, the error message, means. Though I've been working with it for many years, and well. So Microsoft doesn't care about me. I know that, and I give it them.
Mhm.
I'm just using their products because our customers want to use their products. But I have no respect for example, Microsoft as a company.
That's a great example of what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm forced to use it. I'm using it. I'm trying to minimize the pain,
Mm-hmm.
both for myself and for my users, but not more.
But it seems like they don't particularly care about their Swedish customers.
No. Swedish is a Microsoft country, and everybody knows that the government will still buy whatever they get.
Mm-hmm.
So, and who needs them anyhow? They're just 9 million.
Yeah.
So, and that's the attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So, let people learn English instead. And in our company where I make this administration, we have Chinese. I mean, it's a small company in Sweden. Chinese, German, Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, Russian-speaking people, one Iranian engineer, and
Farsi. Yeah.
yeah, Farsi. So,
Yep. Well, that's what we try to help with.
A question. So, do you securely take that data and upload it to you guys' server, I assume, and are people using it for internal sites like that? Like, do you have any sort of, like, do you scrub that data or anonymize it when you send it up to your cloud or something like that? If it, because, like, some of the stuff I would work on that I could potentially see this is more sensitive data.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have some sort of policy where you're in your own silo of, with your API, that it's being translated but not being shared with other stuff like that?
Yes, absolutely. Each customer's data is completely compartmentalized. We have some government customers, and one of our original funders was a government entity and had all sorts of requirements like that. And so there are other things that can be done as well. Like you could have your own. We're hosted on AWS. You could have your own, for example, sort of cloud system if you want, if it needs to be that much. But just in the general way of doing things, every customer's data it entirely belongs to them, so they have access to it all the time. But it's not ever bleeding over into other customers' data or used for any other purpose. They have their own translation memory vaults that it all gets stored in, and it's very secure, and the API calls are secure back and forth as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Copyright, who owns the result of the translation?
Oh, the customers.
Because-
Fully, absolutely. That's
So the
important.
translators, they don't have any rights to the...
Well, that's between them and the customer. But
So you have to deal with the,
oh, you were talking about our translators?
yeah.
Yeah, they have no rights to any of it, and that's pretty much industry standard with translation agencies. I mean, there's a global pool of translators. It sounds like you might be one of them. No? I thought you said you translated some.
Yeah, I translate, but I'm like foreign translator,
Okay.
so I'm not doing, I'm doing really like legal translations and such.
Gotcha. But typically, they have their contracts with companies like Lingotek completely, include total confidentiality and total forfeiture of any rights to anything that they translate. So the idea being that the customer that purchases the translation, they have copyrights to the source copy, and they have copyrights to the source copy in all the different languages. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Well done. Can't get
Thank you.
thundering applause if
That's
only
from three
are done.
people. That's why I clap too. 25% more.